While your electricity bill skyrockets keeping meat fresh in your fridge, Amish families are preserving their steaks and roasts for months without spending a single cent on power. Their secret? 9 ancient preservation methods so effective they make modern refrigeration look like a luxury, not a necessity. Let me start with water bath canning, the Amish version of meal prep that would make any modern food influencer jealous. While we're busy showing off our fancy meal prep containers on social media, Amish families have been jarring up delicious meals that last longer than most New Year's resolutions. Here's the fascinating part. They start by cooking or prepping raw meat, sometimes giving it a salt massage first, then tucking it into squeaky clean glass jars. These jars take a hot bath in boiling water, which might sound simple, but it's actually a brilliant bit of science at work. The heat doesn't just warm things up. It's like a security system, wiping out any bacteria that might try to crash the party. The process is pretty specific, though. First, they sterilize those jars until they're cleaner than a teenager's room when they want something from their parents. Then comes the careful packing. You can't just throw the meat in there like you're filling a lunchbox. They leave a bit of space at the top, about the width of your thumb, which is crucial for creating that perfect seal. The jar lids get their own special treatment too, warming up in hot but not boiling water to soften their sealing compound. The real magic happens during cool down. As the jars chill out, they create a vacuum seal tighter than your grandmother's Tupperware collection. This seal is basically a force field against spoilage, keeping the meat fresh for 6 months to a year. My Amish friend John says he once forgot about a jar of beef stew in the back of his pantry for 14 months. When he finally opened it, it was still perfect. Talk about a time capsule you can eat. What's really cool is how versatile this method is. Chicken, beef, pork, even fish, they all get the spa treatment. And unlike your leftovers hiding in the back of the fridge, these jars actually get better with time as the flavors meld together. Some Amish families even have special recipes they only make for canning, like their famous 24-hour stew that simmers so long it practically melts in your mouth by the time you open the jar. But canning isn't the only way the Amish keep their meat fresh without electricity. They've got plenty more tricks up their sleeves. You might be surprised to learn that fat is actually a superstar when it comes to keeping meat fresh. The Amish have mastered the art of using rendered lard. And no, we're not talking about the kind of fat-free diet trends you see on Instagram. This is the real deal, passed down through generations, like a treasured family recipe. The process starts with chunks of pig fat, slowly melted down until they transform into liquid gold. It's like giving your meat its own protective bubble wrap, except this wrapper is actually delicious. The Amish take their time with this process. Rushing lard rendering is like trying to hurry a cat. It'll happen when it happens, and not a moment sooner. Once the fat has melted into crystal clear lard, it's time for the main event. They pour this warm liquid fat over cuts of meat, creating a seal that would make any food preservation expert proud. As the lard cools, it hardens into a protective shell that keeps air and bacteria out better than your teenager keeps their siblings out of their room. The science behind it is pretty neat. The solid fat creates an airtight barrier that stops spoilage in its tracks. But here's the really clever part. This method doesn't just preserve the meat, it actually makes it better. The lard slowly infuses the meat with flavor, making it more tender and juicy as time goes on. It's like a spa treatment for your Sunday roast. And unlike modern preservatives with names you can't pronounce, this is just pure, simple fat doing what it does best. The Amish store these lard-preserved meats in their cool cellars where they can last anywhere from 3 to 6 months. Some families swear their great-grandparents kept meat this way for even longer, though they might be stretching the truth as much as that lard stretches across a warm piece of bread. But sometimes the Amish take a different approach to preservation, one that brings a whole new flavor to the table. The tang of vinegar might make your face scrunch up, but in Amish communities, it's the secret weapon for keeping meat fresh longer than your last Netflix binge. Vinegar brining isn't just about preservation. It's an art form that turns ordinary cuts of meat into something that would make your taste buds do a happy dance. The basic recipe is pretty straightforward. Mix vinegar with water, toss in some salt, and sometimes sugar if you're feeling fancy, and add whatever herbs and spices you've got lying around. The Amish have perfected these ratios over generations, though getting the recipe from them is harder than getting a straight answer from a politician. Each family guards their special blend like it's the secret formula for Coca-Cola. The science behind it is actually pretty cool. That sharp acidic vinegar creates an environment where bacteria basically throw up their hands and say, "Nope, not living here." Meanwhile, the salt plays its own important role, drawing moisture out of the meat like a sponge. Less moisture means fewer places for unwanted bacteria to set up shop. It's like evicting troublesome tenants before they can cause problems. But here's where it gets interesting. The longer the meat sits in this tangy bath, the more complex the flavors become. Some Amish families swear by a 3-day soak, while others let their meat vacation in the brine for up to a week. The meat doesn't just survive this acid bath, it comes out transformed, tender enough to cut with a spoon, and packed with more flavor than a gossip column. The best part? This method works on practically everything. Pork turns out so tender, it falls apart if you look at it too hard. Beef develops a flavor that'll make you forget about your favorite steakhouse. Even fish gets in on the action, though you might want to go easy on the soaking time unless you're aiming for something that tastes like pickled herring's cousin. When stored properly in a cool place, and by cool we mean somewhere around 50 to 60 degrees, not your teenage son's definition of cool, the only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. Vinegar brined meat can last for months, though honestly, in most Amish households, it rarely sits around that long. It's just too tempting to resist. But for those looking for something a bit more portable, there's another preservation method that's been feeding travelers and hunters for centuries. Before protein bars and energy drinks took over gym bags everywhere, there was pemmican, the original powerhouse snack that kept Native Americans and later Amish communities fueled through long winters and longer journeys. It's basically the great-great-grandparent of every energy bar you've ever eaten, just without the fancy packaging and questionable chocolate coating. Creating pemmican is like conducting a meaty symphony in 3 parts. First, you take lean meat, usually beef or venison, and dry it until it's harder than trying to convince a cat to take a bath. The Amish have perfected this first step, drying their meat until it's almost as brittle as your aunt's Christmas cookies. Then they grind it into a powder finer than the excuses you make for skipping leg day at the gym. Next comes the secret ingredient, fat. But not just any fat. We're talking properly rendered, crystal clear fat that's been heated and strained until it's purer than a teenager's first love. The ratio is crucial here. Too much fat and you've got a greasy mess. Too little and your pemmican will be drier than small talk at a family reunion. The final touch? Some Amish families add dried berries to the mix. Cranberries, blueberries, even cherries. These aren't just for taste, though they do make the pemmican more interesting than your cousin's vacation slideshows. The berries add vital nutrients and a touch of sweetness that makes the survival food actually enjoyable to eat. When done right, pemmican is more shelf-stable than your grandmother's fruitcake. You know, the one that's been regifted since 1985. We're talking about food that can last up to a year without refrigeration. Early Native American traders could carry pemmican for months across vast distances, and modern Amish families still rely on it during the lean winter months when fresh meat is harder to come by than a teenager without a phone. The best part? A single handful of pemmican packs enough calories and nutrients to keep you going through a full day of barn raising or whatever else life throws your way. It's like carrying a steakhouse dinner in your pocket, minus the fancy tablecloth and judgy waiters. Speaking of keeping things cool, there's another method the Amish use that takes advantage of Mother Nature's own refrigeration system. Deep beneath the ground, Amish families have their own version of a refrigerator, the root cellar. This isn't just a hole in the ground, it's an engineering marvel that keeps food fresh using nothing but dirt, gravity, and good old-fashioned physics. Mother Nature's cool box runs 24/7 without ever sending you an electricity bill. The magic of a root cellar lies in its temperature control. The earth naturally maintains a steady 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, about 6 feet below the surface. That's more reliable than your local weather forecaster and perfect for keeping meat fresh. While your modern fridge is busy humming away and drinking electricity like a teenager guzzling soda, these underground storage spaces stay cool all by themselves. Building a proper root cellar takes more planning than a wedding and more patience than teaching your grandparents to use a smartphone. The walls need to be thick enough to keep the cold in and the warmth out. Ventilation is crucial too. You need just enough airflow to prevent mold, but not so much that you lose the cool temperature. It's like trying to find the perfect balance between keeping your car windows down and the AC on. Except this actually works. Most Amish root cellars come equipped with special shelving systems. The bottom shelves, where it's coldest, are reserved for meat that's been salted, smoked, or cured. The middle shelves hold things like sausages and bacon, while the upper levels store foods that don't need quite as much chill. It's like an underground apartment building where every tenant has their perfect temperature zone. The humidity in these cellars hovers around 85 to 95%, which might sound like a bad hair day waiting to happen, but it's perfect for preventing meat from drying out. The steady moisture level keeps everything just right. Not too wet, not too dry. But for those times when you want your meat to dry out on purpose, there's another method that turns ordinary cuts into long-lasting, protein-packed snacks. Long before beef jerky became the favorite snack of gym enthusiasts and road trippers everywhere, Amish families were mastering the art of drying meat. While modern folks might shell out $5 for a tiny bag of jerky at the gas station, Amish communities have been turning their surplus meat into chewy, savory snacks that last longer than most Hollywood marriages. The key to perfect dried meat is all about the slice. Too thick and you'll end up with something that requires the jaw strength of a crocodile to chew through. Too thin and it'll end up more brittle than your uncle's jokes at Thanksgiving dinner. The Amish aim for strips about as thick as a deck of cards split into 3. Thin enough to dry properly, but thick enough to give your teeth something to work on. Getting the moisture out is a slow dance that can't be rushed. Some families use the traditional air drying method, hanging strips of meat in a well-ventilated space where the breeze can work its magic. Others prefer their smokehouses, where the meat slowly transforms while getting a flavor boost from smoldering hardwood. The process can take anywhere from a few days to a couple of weeks, depending on the humidity and how patient you're feeling. Temperature control is crucial. You want it warm enough to dry the meat, but not so hot that it cooks. It's like finding the perfect spot on the beach. Not too hot, not too cold, just right for achieving that perfect jerky texture. The Amish have this down to such a science that they can tell if the conditions are right just by feeling the air, no fancy thermometers needed. The result? Meat that's concentrated down to pure protein, with flavors more intense than a teenager's first crush. A single piece of properly dried venison jerky packs more protein per ounce than a fresh steak, and it'll keep for months in a simple cloth bag. No wonder early American settlers considered dried meat more valuable than gold during long winter months. But sometimes you need more than just dried meat to get through the seasons. That's where another preservation method comes in, one that uses 2 of the most basic ingredients in any kitchen to work its magic. Salt has always been the heavyweight champion of meat preservation in Amish communities, with sugar playing an occasional supporting role. When it comes to keeping meat fresh without electricity, salt curing is like that reliable friend who never lets you down. It's been the go-to method since before anyone can remember. The process starts with salt, lots of it. We're talking enough salt to make your doctor nervous, but don't worry, most of it won't end up in the final product. The Amish coat their meat with this crystal blanket and let it do its thing. Salt is like that overachieving student in class. It gets right to work, pulling moisture out of the meat faster than your kids can empty their college savings account. Some families add a touch of sugar to help balance the saltiness, kind of like bringing your cheerful cousin to visit your grumpy uncle. It just makes everything work better. But make no mistake, salt is doing the heavy lifting here. It creates an environment so unwelcoming to bacteria that they'd rather find somewhere else to set up shop. The real trick lies in the timing. Leave the meat in its salty embrace too long, and you'll end up with something drier than a history lecture on a hot summer afternoon. Don't leave it long enough, and you're basically inviting bacteria to an all-you-can-eat buffet. The Amish have perfected this timing over generations, passing down the knowledge like a cherished family secret. Different meats need different treatment too. A thick ham might spend weeks getting friendly with its salt coating, while smaller cuts might be done in just a few days. It's not unusual to see Amish families marking their calendars just to keep track of when each piece needs attention, kind of like remembering all your kids' soccer practices, but with more delicious results. The finished product can last for months without refrigeration, assuming you can resist eating it that long. The meat develops a flavor that's more complex than your aunt's relationship status, with each bite telling the story of its careful preservation. But if you think salt curing is impressive, wait until you hear about how the Amish use smoke to transform their meat into something even more remarkable. Fire and smoke. The oldest dance partners in the meat preservation world. The Amish have turned smoking meat into such an art form that their smokehouses could make a BBQ pitmaster weep tears of joy. These simple wooden structures, often no bigger than your average garden shed, produce flavors that would put most five-star restaurants to shame. The Amish practice two main types of smoking, each with its own special magic. Hot smoking is like sending your meat to a spa retreat. It gets cooked and preserved at the same time, emerging transformed and ready for the long haul. Cold smoking, on the other hand, is more like a slow courtship. The meat spends days or even weeks getting acquainted with gentle wisps of smoke, developing flavors deeper than your grandfather's philosophical discussions. The choice of wood is crucial, more important than your teenager's choice of prom date. Cherry wood adds a subtle sweetness that works wonders with pork. Hickory brings a bold, savory note that turns ordinary beef into something extraordinary. Applewood? It's the crowd-pleasing choice that never fails to impress. Like bringing chocolate chip cookies to a potluck. Temperature control is where the real skill comes in. Too hot and you've got yourself a cookout instead of preservation. Too cool and you're just making the meat smell nice without doing any actual preserving. The perfect smoke should be thinner than your great-aunt's patience at family reunions. Just a gentle blue haze that works its way into every fiber of the meat. The results are worth every minute of waiting. Properly smoked meat can last up to 6 months without refrigeration, though most families can't resist digging in much sooner. The outer layer develops a rich mahogany color that's prettier than your neighbor's prize roses, while the inside stays moist and tender enough to make your mouth water just thinking about it. But what about those times when even smoke isn't enough to beat the heat? That's when the Amish turn to another method, one that harnesses the power of winter itself. During winter, Amish communities turn into ice harvesting experts, creating their own version of frozen food storage that would put your power-hungry freezer to shame. Ice houses are basically winter's gift to summer, storing massive blocks of ice that keep working long after the last snowman has melted. The harvesting process happens during the coldest days of winter, when local ponds and lakes freeze solid. Teams of workers cut out huge blocks of ice. We're talking chunks bigger than your holiday credit card bill. These frozen giants get hauled to specially built ice houses where they're packed tighter than sardines in a can with layers of sawdust or straw between them for insulation. The real genius is in the design of these ice houses. They're built partially underground, using the Earth's natural cooling properties to help keep things chilly. The walls are thick enough to make a fortress jealous, usually with a double-layer design that creates an insulating air pocket. It's like a thermos for your meat, just scaled up to the size of a small building. The ice blocks can keep meat fresh for months, slowly melting through spring and summer while keeping the temperature steady around 40 degrees. One well-packed ice house can preserve enough meat to feed several families through the hottest months of the year. And unlike your modern freezer, it never breaks down right before a big party. These methods have stood the test of time, proving that sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Each technique, from water bath canning to ice houses, shows how clever people can be when they need to solve a problem without plugging anything in. And that's something worth preserving. In a world dominated by modern conveniences, the Amish community shines with their remarkable ability to preserve milk without relying on refrigeration or pasteurization. Their techniques reflect a deep respect for tradition, nature, and resourcefulness, showcasing how generations have passed down time-tested methods that keep milk fresh and nutritious. When it comes to preserving milk, one way the Amish tackle the challenge is by drying it into powdered form. It might not be the most common practice in their communities, but when they do use it, it's like a clever magic trick. Turn a liquid that spoils quickly into a powder that could survive the apocalypse. Okay, maybe not that long, but close enough. You'd be surprised how much moisture is hiding in a glass of milk. Drying it out is like wringing water from a sponge you didn't even know was wet. The result? A fine, dusty powder that can sit on a shelf for months without giving you that nasty, I shouldn't have smelled this moment. And once you've got the powder, just add water and boom, you're back in the dairy business. Sure, it might not taste exactly like a fresh gallon straight from Bessie the cow, but desperate times, my friend. Amish families that use this method don't have high-tech factory machines for it. Instead, it's often done with homemade dehydrators or even wood-fired setups because, let's face it, they can build just about anything with wood and nails. The process takes time, probably more time than most of us are willing to wait, which is part of the charm. Slow and steady wins the race, and in this case, it wins a pantry full of milk powder that can outlive 2 Ohio winters. Fun fact, powdered milk, if stored right, can last up to 25 years. That's longer than most Hollywood marriages. If there's one thing I learned spending time on an Amish farm, it's that patience is baked into everything they do. One time I tried to help churn butter, and after 5 minutes of cranking, my arms felt like jelly. The lady of the house just smiled and said, "Tired already? That's the warm-up." That same steady, unhurried approach is what makes drying milk work. It's all about taking it slow. Low heat, lots of stirring, and a touch of hope. It's the kind of thing that makes you wonder if people in the 21st century even know what patience is anymore. They aren't exactly running a powdered milk factory, but when it's done right, the results are pure gold. Powdered gold. The beauty of powdered milk is that it fits seamlessly into a lifestyle that's built around self-reliance. When you've got milk in powder form, you've got options. Mix it up for drinking, use it in recipes, or just keep it on hand for emergencies. No refrigeration needed. No expiration dates lurking like ticking time bombs. And here's a little secret. It's not just humans who benefit. Some Amish farmers even use it to feed animals during dry spells or when fresh milk is in short supply. It's a practical solution to a tricky problem, like most things the Amish do. They have a way of making life look simple, even though anyone who's tried it knows that simplicity takes a whole lot of effort. This method also comes in handy when the weather gets iffy. Imagine winter storms that knock out power for days. For the rest of us, that's panic mode. No fridge, no milk, and chaos at the grocery store. But for the Amish, just another Tuesday. They've got their powdered milk stashed in glass jars or tightly sealed containers, sitting quietly on a shelf waiting to be used. No need to rush, no need to panic. That's the real magic behind all these preservation methods. It's not just about keeping milk safe to drink, it's about keeping peace of mind. Turning milk into butter is more than just a preservation trick. It's a hands-on workout with a tasty prize at the end. The Amish approach to butter making looks simple, but once you're halfway through churning that thick cream, you'll feel muscles you didn't know existed. It's a little like trying to whisk cement. At first, it's fun, but by the 10th minute, you're wondering how your grandmother made it look so easy. Trust me, I once tried helping churn butter during a visit to an Amish family. 5 minutes in, my arms gave up, and their teenage daughter took over with the energy of someone who's been cranking churns since birth. She gave me a grin and said, "Tired already?" "Yeah." Butter making builds character and biceps. The process starts by separating cream from the milk, usually after letting it settle naturally overnight. The Amish don't rush these things. They know that patience is part of the recipe. Once the cream is skimmed off, it goes into a churn, and the real work begins. Some families use the traditional hand-crank churn, while others go with a plunger-style churn. Basically, a tall cylinder with a stick you plunge up and down until your arms feel like noodles. There's no electricity involved, just elbow grease and determination. After what feels like an eternity, but is probably only 20 minutes, the cream thickens, and suddenly, butter starts forming. Along with it comes buttermilk, which doesn't go to waste either. It's saved for baking or even drinking. Waste not, want not. What makes butter such a clever preservation method is that it lasts far longer than milk, especially if stored in a cool place. Salted butter takes things up a notch, acting like nature's own preservative. The salt keeps bacteria from causing trouble, so butter can sit for weeks without spoiling. And if you've ever had fresh Amish butter spread on warm bread, you'll know it's worth the effort. Butter this good almost feels sinful, like you're getting away with something. Some Amish families store their butter in stone crocks, tucked away in cool cellars. It's the kind of old-school storage that makes you wonder if modern fridges are overrated. On cooler days, the butter sits proudly on the kitchen counter, ready for action. It's funny how butter, something so simple, becomes the centerpiece of every meal, from morning toast to mashed potatoes at dinner. The beauty of this method is how sustainable it is. There's no mad dash to finish off gallons of milk before they spoil. Instead, it's like alchemy, turning something perishable into something that stays fresh long after the cows have gone back to grazing. Butter has this way of fitting seamlessly into the rhythm of Amish life. It's not just a way to save milk, it's part of the tradition. And it's practical too. In fact, salted butter stored in a cool cellar can stay fresh for months, longer than most of us keep track of expiration dates on store-bought tubs. And let's not forget the buttermilk bonus. It gets whisked into pancakes, biscuits, or cornbread, adding flavor that store-bought milk can't compete with. There's also something satisfying about the ritual of churning butter. It's not just about the end product, it's about the journey too. Maybe that's what makes it so special, knowing that every spoonful is the result of hard work. Butter becomes more than just a condiment. It's a reward, a little pat on the back, literally if you're over-enthusiastic with your serving size. You appreciate it in a way you never would with something pulled off a grocery store shelf. And in true Amish fashion, they've found a way to turn this necessity into an art form, one that sticks with you long after the butter is gone. This process isn't just for tradition's sake, it's downright practical. On hot summer days, when the heat makes fresh milk turn sour in the blink of an eye, butter stays solid and reliable. While milk might go bad, butter stands its ground, sitting calmly on the shelf, ready to be spread, melted, or whisked into a recipe. And here's the kicker. Even if the butter does start to soften in the summer heat, it doesn't spoil right away. It just gets more spreadable. That's what I call a win-win. If only more things in life could handle pressure as gracefully as butter. Cheese isn't just preserved milk. It's what happens when dairy dreams come true. Turning milk into cheese isn't a job. It's more like coaxing milk to live its best life. And the Amish, they've turned it into an art form. With a pinch of rennet, a few hours of stirring, and a lot of patience, they transform fresh milk into wheels of magic. Hard cheeses like cheddar, Parmesan, or even Gouda are the go-to choices. Why? These cheeses are marathon runners, not sprinters. They last far longer than soft cheeses like brie or mozzarella. You could say they're the preppers of the dairy world, ready to survive anything from a power outage to a particularly rough Ohio summer. And in the cool basement of an Amish farmhouse, a hunk of well-waxed cheddar can age gracefully for months, getting sharper with every passing day. It's basically the cheese equivalent of that cranky uncle who somehow becomes funnier with age. The secret weapon for these long-lasting cheeses? Wax. Once a cheese is waxed, it's sealed tight against air and bacteria. No fancy humidity-controlled caves required. Just a cool, dark spot will do. Ice houses make excellent stand-ins, but even a root cellar can get the job done. In fact, there's something kind of charming about picturing a big old wheel of cheese quietly aging next to a basket of potatoes, minding its own business. And here's a fun nugget of trivia. The longer a cheese is aged, the more intense the flavor. An Amish cheddar aged for a year or two? That's not just food, it's a culinary adventure. You'll know you've hit the jackpot when a single bite makes your taste buds tingle and your nose hairs twitch. That's flavor with personality. They say that cheddar can develop crystals over time, which are like little crunchy surprises hidden in every bite, a kind of edible treasure hunt. Now, if you've ever wondered about how they store all that cheese, the answer lies in their practicality. They might slice off what they need for the week and leave the rest sealed in wax, tucked away for future use. Cheese isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity. On cold winter days when fresh milk isn't flowing, a slice of that aged cheese can turn a plain loaf of bread into a feast. I remember once visiting an Amish family during their cheese-making season. The kitchen smelled of milk and fresh whey, and there were massive pots on the stove, bubbling away with curds. They let me stir the pot, and let me tell you, stirring curds is harder than it looks. After a few minutes, my arm was burning, but The kids, who had been doing it all day, didn't seem fazed at all. When I asked how they kept at it, one of them just grinned and said, "We build our strength one wheel of cheddar at a time." And speaking of the kids, they take pride in learning the family cheese recipes. It's not just food, it's tradition. Each wheel, each batch carries a bit of family history, passed down from one generation to the next. It's a beautiful thing, really. And as someone who's tasted their work, I can confidently say there's nothing quite like homemade Amish cheese. Even when I tried storing some of it back home, it felt like the taste improved every day, as if it was waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself fully. But don't let the slow aging process fool you. Cheese making might take time, but the payoff is instant once that knife slices through the waxy shell. It's like unwrapping a gift. Every time, it feels special. And in a way, cheese teaches a life lesson too. Good things really do come to those who wait. So the next time you see a wheel of Amish cheese, know that it's more than just dairy. It's a celebration of patience, practicality, and a little bit of fun. And if you've got a block aging somewhere in your kitchen right now, you're in for a treat. Just don't let it age too long, or it might develop a personality of its own. Ever heard the phrase, "let nature take its course"? The Amish take that to heart with milk fermentation, because sometimes spoiled milk isn't spoiled at all. It's just becoming something better. Fermentation makes clabber, yogurt, and other tangy treats, giving dairy an extra lease on life without relying on electricity. What makes this process fascinating is that it's not rushed or fussy, just raw milk, time, and the right environment. It's the kind of simplicity that feels like a small rebellion against modern use by dates. Fermented milk doesn't ask for much. Leave it sitting out long enough, preferably in a cool room or cellar, and instead of a sour mess, you'll get thickened, cultured goodness. Clabber, one of the stars of the Amish kitchen, comes from milk naturally fermenting into a creamy, yogurt-like texture. It's humble but delicious, especially spread over warm cornbread or biscuits, and there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that this was once the staple breakfast food of early settlers. Because why waste fresh milk when you can let it mature into something that lasts? Now, not everyone appreciates clabber on the first try. I remember visiting an Amish farm where the lady of the house handed me a spoonful with a proud grin. I was hesitant, but after one taste, that tangy richness won me over instantly. It's the kind of food that makes you realize some things just need time to get better, like good friendships or a vintage cheddar. The real trick lies in how they use it. Amish families don't just sprinkle salt on food, they use it strategically. Butter, for instance, gets generously salted before being stored in crocks or tightly sealed jars. You'll find that some families even bury the jars halfway underground in a cool cellar to keep the temperature steady. As for cheese, the process is all about patience. Hard cheeses get rubbed down or soaked in brine, a saltwater solution so intense it could make the Dead Sea look drinkable. It's not uncommon to see a few salt-rubbed wheels of cheddar resting on a shelf, waiting to become the star of some Sunday supper. But there's more to it than that. Salt isn't just about preservation, it's also about tradition. There's a rhythm to the way Amish households prepare their salted butter, mixing just the right amount to keep it fresh yet flavorful. It's not guesswork. It's a recipe that's been passed down like a family secret. And as far as secrets go, salt really is one of those unassuming ingredients that turns out to be a game changer. It's why some cheeses can sit for months, growing sharper and tastier as the weeks pass. Thinking back, my first taste of salted Amish butter came during a visit to a friend's farm. They handed me a warm slice of bread with a thick layer of golden butter on it. I'd expected it to taste, well, like butter. But the salt hit my taste buds like a perfectly timed punchline in a joke. Just the right amount of zing. That's when I realized that in a place where refrigerators are few and far between, salt isn't just a flavor, it's a lifeline. Kefir is like the rebellious teenager of dairy products, full of attitude and packed with surprises. While yogurt might be the responsible older sibling, Kefir dances to its own funky beat, turning simple milk into something extraordinary. It's made using grains that contain both bacteria and yeast, resulting in a fizzy, tangy drink that's not only tasty, but also great for your gut. The Amish have taken to Kefir as if it were their own creation, using it both as a nourishing food and a natural remedy. The beauty of Kefir lies in its longevity. It can hang around longer than a guest who's overstayed their welcome. Once the milk has been transformed, it keeps well in a cool place, making it a reliable option when fresh milk starts to feel a little too fresh. Plus, kefir's probiotic benefits are like a bonus, helping with digestion while you sip away. If you ever see an Amish farmer handing out kefir to the cows, don't be surprised. It's a staple for the livestock too. The animals thrive on it, proving that good things come in tangy packages. Now, if you've never tried kefir, let me tell you, it's not your average drink. The first time I tasted it, I was skeptical. I had grown up with milk as my go-to, but then I encountered this bubbly, tart wonder. Imagine my surprise when I found out it's not just milk gone bad, it's a delightful experience. Slurping down a glass of homemade kefir alongside some warm, fresh bread is a memory I still cherish. Talk about a culinary adventure right on the kitchen table. And here's a little tidbit. Did you know that kefir can be made from a variety of milks? Cow, goat, even sheep. Whatever tickles your fancy. The beauty of kefir is that it can take on different flavors, depending on the milk you use. So, if you're feeling adventurous, you might find yourself experimenting with different kinds of milk, making each batch a little different from the last. Just imagine sitting down with your family and friends, sharing stories while sipping on a glass of homemade kefir, each sip bringing a new layer of flavor. Let's not forget the fun part about kefir grains. They multiply. It's like a little science project in your kitchen. Every time you make a batch, you can end up with more grains to share with friends or even use in other recipes. It's an excellent way to bond with your neighbors or introduce someone new to the joys of cultured milk. Plus, who doesn't love a good conversation starter about those weird little grains that keep giving? So next time you think of milk, consider this. It's not just a drink, it's a world of possibilities. From refreshing kefir to the deep, tangy flavors that only fermentation can provide, there's a whole journey in each glass. And if you've ever experienced the joy of discovering a new favorite food, you know just how rewarding it can be. With kefir in the mix, the Amish way of preserving milk is not only practical, but downright delicious. Why rely on a fridge when nature has already invented one? Spring houses are a brilliant, simple solution the Amish have been using for generations. They're built right over a natural spring. Think of it as a walk-in cooler that's completely free of electricity. You can almost hear Mother Nature chuckling with satisfaction. Here's how it works. The cool, flowing water underneath keeps the air inside the spring house chilly all year round. So, when the milk jugs are placed in this watery haven, they stay fresh and cold without any of the fuss of modern refrigeration. It's like giving milk a little vacation every time you store it. And it's not just milk that benefits. Eggs, butter, and cheese often take a dip in these cool waters too. They're practically the multi-purpose MVPs of dairy preservation. Picture yourself standing in a spring house on a hot summer day. The temperature inside significantly lower than outside. The tranquility is palpable, and the gentle sound of water flowing adds to the charm. It's a sneakily refreshing place to hang out, not to mention the perfect cover for snagging a slice of cheese without anyone being the wiser. Seriously, it beats any air conditioning system on the market. On a more personal note, the first time I stepped into a spring house, I felt like I'd stumbled into a hidden treasure. I didn't know what to expect, but the cool air felt like a warm hug from an old friend. The smell of fresh cheese mixed with cool, crisp water was something I'll never forget. And the milk. Oh boy, it tasted like it had been kissed by the cool spring itself. The Amish really know how to work with what they've got, and spring houses are a shining example of their resourcefulness. They've turned an ordinary running stream into an ingenious food preservation method. Now that's a win-win if I've ever seen one. What's even more remarkable is how these spring houses maintain their coolness in the sweltering summer heat and the bitter cold of winter. While most of us are cranking up our heaters, the Amish are simply letting nature do its thing. It's a reminder of how some of the best solutions come straight from the earth, requiring little more than a bit of ingenuity and a whole lot of patience. The art of using spring houses is like a masterclass in sustainability. No energy bills, no gadgets, just pure, simple, effective preservation. Next time you sip a glass of milk or spread some butter on bread, think of all the clever methods that keep it fresh and delicious. It's all about that timeless tradition, ensuring that milk doesn't just stay good, it becomes a vital part of daily life. Sour cream is like the wise grandparent of dairy products. Slightly tangy, a little quirky, and perfect for spicing things up. Making sour cream is surprisingly straightforward. Amish families often let raw milk sit out to sour naturally. Some might add special cultures to speed up the process, but either way, it's all about letting nature take its course. This hands-off approach reflects the Amish belief in working with the rhythms of nature instead of against them. Why does this creamy delight hold its own against time? Well, sour cream's tangy nature comes from the lactic acid produced during fermentation, which helps inhibit the growth of bad bacteria. This means it can last for weeks in a cool environment, ideal for drizzling over baked potatoes, mixing into soups, or even dolloping on fresh cornbread. I remember the first time I tasted homemade sour cream at an Amish farm. Skeptical at first, I thought, sour. No thanks. But one bite on that warm cornbread changed my mind. The creaminess and subtle tang made me a believer. It was a flavor explosion that made me question every store-bought version I'd ever tried. When the cream starts to sour, it can also be a sign that it's transforming into something special. This evolution is a win-win for both the taste buds and the pantry. Who knew that letting milk sit could result in such a delicious outcome? Imagine hosting a dinner and serving up a rich, tangy sour cream alongside your famous potato soup. Your guests would be none the wiser, thinking you spent hours perfecting it when, in reality, it was just the magic of souring milk. Plus, it can be used in various recipes, from dips to dressings, making it a versatile staple in any kitchen. Ever tried it in pancakes? Trust me, it adds a fluffiness that's out of this world. When you think about it, sour cream captures the essence of Amish ingenuity, taking something simple and elevating it into something delightful. By embracing time-honored techniques rooted in simplicity and ingenuity, the Amish demonstrate that with a bit of patience and knowledge, we can keep the bounty of nature alive without the need for modern technology. Their practices not only preserve milk, but also preserve a way of life that values sustainability and connection to the land.